Goed, ons lesers sal waarskynlik die verhaal van Vanessa Goosen, Suid-Afrikaanse vrou wat in Thailand in hegtenis geneem is op aanklagte van dwelmhandel en wat 'n groot deel van haar jongmenslewe in haglike omstandighede in 'n tronk uitgedien het, onthou. In die tronk het sy geboorte gegee aan 'n dogtertjie wat op 3-jarige ouderdom volgens die reëls van die gevangenis van haar weggeneem is. Hierdie is die verhaal van daardie dogtertjie. Prison Child deur Felicia Goosen en Deonette Kock. Dit is geskryf of eerder opgeteken, sal ek sê, Deonette, deur die joernalis Deonette Kock. Hoewel ons lesers en organisasie Afrikaans is Felicia Engels sprekend en sal ek sekere gedeeltes in Engels hanteer. Ek voel vir ons as Christenvroue sal die lees van haar storie van heling 'n verrykende ervaring wees. Deonette het die neerskryfwerk gedoen en ek gaan oor 'n paar tegniese punte by haar begin en dan sal ek aangaan met Felicia met haar storie later, as dit reg is met julle. Deonette, ek wil by jou weet, hoe het julle by mekaar uitgekom vir die skryf van hierdie boek?
Marinda, toe Felicia in 2024-jarige teruggekeer het Bangkok toe, Lard Yao toe, om heling te vind. En sy wou te graag teruggegaan het en sy het saam met 'n uitreikgroep gegaan. En onder andere was daar 'n vriendin van my wat saam met haar gegaan het. En toe sy terugkom na hierdie besoek aan Lard Yao, op die ouderdom van 24 jaar, toe wou ek graag 'n artikel skryf daaroor en ek het dit toe wel gedoen vir die Christelike tydskrif Lig. En sy was maar skepties oor joernaliste, want sy na mate baie goeie ervarings van joernaliste en dit wat daar uitkom nie. En sy het vir my die kans gegee en sy was baie tevrede met die artikel. En en na die artikel toe ontmoet ons mekaar deur hierdie vriendin en sy het letterlik vir my later gesê, sy het 4 dae na die artikel wat ek geskryf het sy daar gebid en sy het geweet ek is die regte persoon om te vra om haar storie te skryf. Soos ek het haar onderhoude gedoen en die storie geskryf. Ja, soos dis die rede hoe sy by my uitgekom het.
Deonette, ek wil vir jou vra oor die formaat van die boek. Dit is in die ek-verteller, dis Felicia se storie, maar omdat dit ook gesê word dat jy dit neergeskryf het soos dit aan jou vertel is dit nogal, bly mens bewus daarvoor dat dit nie die ek net Felicia is wat geskryf het nie. Hoe het julle op hierdie formaat besluit? Het jy dit gedoen vir die persoonlike aanslag van die storie oor dit in wese haar storie is?
Ja, ek het met my uitgewer Susan Jordaan van Lux Verbi gesels en besluit dit is die beste opsie om in die eerste persoon dit te vertel, want dit trek die leser meer in. Soos dit is maar net die beter opsie gewees en ek dink dit werk goed. Soos om Felicia se storie aan te hoor en dan ook haar emosies en alles by te voeg. Dit het uitstekend gewerk, soos dit was op die ou end die enigste veilige opsie.
Ja, so opvolgvraag daaroor, hoe het jy dit al die partye hanteer? Kyk, self as 'n joernalis, weet ek dat 'n mens nogal 'n ding het oor feite nagaan en jou feite opvolg en dat dit korrek moet wees. Het jy dit deur onderhoude gedoen of het jy saam met Felicia byvoorbeeld met die familie of met mense wat ook betrokke is gepraat?
Felicia, sy het op die ou end het sy vir 2 weke by ons kom bly in Montetjie in die Klein Karoo en ons het die onderhoude opgeneem. Maar en ek het my vrae voor die tyd uitgewerk deur haar ma se boek 2 maal deur te lees. Vanessa het ook 'n boek uitgereik en ek het my vrae daarvolgens opgestel en onder andere het ek ook met haar familie wat ek gedink het nodig is, onder andere Vanessa, wat die tweede hoofstuk het ek geskryf oor haar ma, om net die leser te bewus te maak van wat sy deurgemaak het en hoe sy daar inskakel. En soos ja, my navorsing was deeglik en daarvolgens kon ek die vrae opstel. Soos toe Felicia na ons kom, was dit vir my baie maklik eintlik, want ek glo aan deeglike beplanning en die vrae reg opstel en ons het ja, dit vanuit my huis gedoen en ek het dit net opgevolg toe Felicia terug aan Johannesburg toe, as ek onseker was om vir haar te bel. Soos ons het vir amper 'n jaar die hele tyd kontak gehad, steeds, om dat my feite korrek is. En sy het ook in elk geval die manuskrip deurgegaan voor publikasie. Soos op die manier kon ons dit doen.
Ja, ek wil nou by julle, eintlik is dit seker al twee van julle wat besluit het, maar terwyl ons met die tegniese goed met Deonette besig is, hoe besluit jy wat sê jy en wat los jy uit?
Wel, Felicia en ek het 'n vertrouensverhouding. Felicia sal dit beamoen. Soos ons het besluit om wat sy nie wil in hê nie, ons besluit, sy besluit en ek respekteer haar besluite. Soos ek kan nie iets insit wat sy nie van hou nie. Soos ons het besluit saam daaroor. Partykeer het sy vir my goed vertel wat ons nie gaan skryf nie, maar dit is meestal alles wat sy tevrede mee was, het ek geskryf oor. Soos weer eens vertroue. Felicia het my vertrou en ek wou graag dat vertroue werd wees om die storie reg deur te gee aan die leser.
Ja. Dit antwoord ook in 'n baie groot mate my volgende vraag aan jou. Daar is baie ontstellende onderwerpe wat aangeroer word, so selfbesering, selfdood, gedagtes by jong mense. En dit word vir my baie eerlik en feitelik weergegee, sonder om Felicia se gevoelens te minag. Was dit vir jou moeilik om te hanteer?
Ja, kyk, oor selfbesering, soos hulle in self-harming is eintlik my mooi Engelse woord daarvoor, maar daar is al daai seerkry goed van Felicia was vir my baie swaar. Vir my was dit regtig swaar, want dit is die realiteit van haar lewe en wat met haar gebeur het. Soos, ja, dit was vir my baie, baie emosioneel. Ek was saam met haar met die onderhoude emosioneel, en dit was baie, baie swaar geweest om dit te deel, om baie diep ver terug te kyk in haar siel en al daai goed met my te deel. Soos natuurlik was dit vir my baie swaar geweest, want dit is groot onderwerpe, soos jy sê, aktuele onderwerpe, soos pogings tot selfdood, selfbesering, en die rede is ook hoekom, en om te dink dat hierdie pragtige klein dogtertjie wat op 3 jaar eenvoudig weggeneem is van haar ma, waar sy gelukkig was in die tronk, bygesê, en na 'n vreemde, nuwe land te kom, wat sy net Thai kon praat. Julle moet ook onthou, sy kon nie eintlik Engels praat nie. Soos alles was van nuut en vreemd, en om in haar woorde, en jy weet, om haar emosies te beleef het hier by my huis, en dit aan te hoor, was my werklik moeilik. En dit het vir my ook eintlik baie geleer, die manier hoe Felicia haar probleme op die ou end hanteer het, en ja, sy het rebelse tienerjare gehad, en sy het verkeerde dinge gedoen, maar sy het haar hele lewe omgekeer, en toe sy die Here gevind het, en sy het 'n wonderlike, sy's 'n sterk gelowige vrou, wat ek kyk op na haar, om te dink hoe sy haar lewe omgedraai het, en vandag is sy net hierdie wonderlike vrou wat sterk is, en haar geloof uitdra en na almal om haar en haar storie wil deel, sodat ander ook kan heel as hulle die boek lees wat ook sulke probleme het.
Ja. 'n Laaste vraag aan jou, Deonette. Daar's vir my 'n subtiele wending in die skryfstyl in die laaste derde van die boek. Ongeveer van die gedeelte van Moving Back Home af. Dit is asof die leser skielik meer deel word van die storie. Ek weet nie of dit my verbeelding is, of het jy makliker geskryf hieraan, is dit toe Felicia se storie, toe sy meer 'n volwasse persoon word, dat dit makliker was met 'n deel om dit te deel, of was dit 'n deel wat jou meer geïnspireer het en waarmee jy meer kon identifiseer? Nou weet ek nie of dit my verbeelding was nie, maar dis maar hoe ek dit ervaar het as leser.
Marinda, nee, het is my interessant dat jy dit noem. Ek het dit regtig nie opgetel nie. Wat ek jou wel kan sê, dit was my 'n fees om Felicia se storie te vertel, al was dit pynlik, maar ek het onthou, jy moet weet, ek het die eerste 3 hoofstukke in Engels geskryf. En toe in Afrikaans, skus tog, ek het dit in Afrikaans geskryf, die eerste 3 hoofstukke, en toe het my uitgewer vir my gebel en gesê ek moet oorslaan en dit liewer in Engels doen. So dit was 'n groot uitdaging en maar ek het soos wat ek gevorder het, het dit makliker gegaan. Soos nou weet ek nie of jy dit net al hoe makliker gevind het nie, want ek is eintlik so vertroud om Felicia se storie net in Engels te weer te gee en eintlik te vertel in Engels. Maar nee, dit is my interessant dat jy het noem, maar mense raak al hoe meer verweef in haar storie, so hoe verder jy gaan. En miskien het jy dit opgetel en sy na maat ook al 'n nader verhouding, 'n naby verhouding begin ontwikkel, soos mense raak net meer gekonfyt en ja, miskien is dit die seer kry jare wat al hoe ligter raak en daar was hy begin heel en tipe van vrede vind en na geloof uitleef, dan raak dit mos maar net eenvoudig makliker.
Ja, dankie. Felicia, I'm coming to you now. After all you went through in your young life and repeatedly stating in the book that you are a very private person, what made you decide to eventually write this book and tell your story so openly?
Yes, I'm a very private person. So the decision came so I'm a youth wellness counselor and a life coach by profession. So I'm constantly dealing with a lot of teens. I'm going through mental health problems. I'm assisting parents through their childhood traumas. So it was this constant, and of course, in the industry, you're hearing what's really happening. You know, the increase in suicide amongst young people, the increase in self-harming, the increase in mental illness, young people just losing hope. The schooling system adds so much pressure. There's bullying, not only like in person, but cyberbullying. They're exposed to so much and so much isolation. So I was constantly hearing this, and I'm sitting there and I say to myself, you know what? I think it's time. I think it's time, because I came to a point where I felt, okay, I feel victorious. You know, I feel like a whole person. I don't feel like part of a person. So it's a good time. And I also felt like in my heart that it's time, because I did want to write it in 2011, you know, just to pour out my feelings and just help myself, because I was really struggling. So I thought writing could help. But I asked myself, how would it end? You know, I don't think I can give anyone hope at this point. It would have just been my diary about my thoughts and my feelings. But in my heart, I knew there will be a right time for it. And in this time, I'm seeing now that it's the right time. So I wanted to be that voice, because so many of the young people I spoke to and my colleagues that help young people as well, they're saying they feel so alone. You know, they feel so misunderstood. And I say to myself, I'm going to pour everything out in this book. My deepest, darkest thoughts, my feelings, as you read, like I was really vulnerable in it. And I done that. And yes, I was afraid, you know, it's not easy putting everything out there for everyone to read. And because I'm a private person now, everybody knows that I wanted to kill myself. They know about, you know, how worthless I felt. And it's not easy for you to put yourself out there, but I knew it's for something bigger, that young person reading that book will know that they're not alone. So many young people has already told me, Felicia, it's like you wrote down what I was thinking, because I couldn't put it in words. You know, just and then adults saying they came through childhood trauma is saying that for such a long time I've lived in this turmoil, and no more. I deserve to live a good life, and I'm choosing to heal. So just really identifying, because you have to be vulnerable to allow other people to be vulnerable. So that's why I decided to embark on it, not for myself, but to be that voice, you know, out there, to save lives, to make people know that there's hope, you're not alone. And these feelings and these thoughts, a few people are having them, you know, and to know that you can do something about it. So that's why I wrote it, decided to.
I will come back to trauma and all those feelings. To start at the beginning, your first memories of your childhood of being happy in prison is such a paradox to the harsh reality that, but it is in a way a testament to what a young child really needs in life, love and acceptance. Throughout the books, the themes of not feeling accepted and rejection are very important. Did this have a big influence on your younger self?
Yes, yes, it did. Rejection, I would say, is the biggest part of it all. You know, understanding that you came from love and safety, and the person that was there just gave you away, like from a child's perspective, which is obviously different, but as a 3-year-old, you can't comprehend that, you know, and you're taken out of the safety, you're taken out of what you know into a strange place, and continue to build up on that. Like somebody asked me, were you leaving the prison the effect of everything? And then I said, no, it was the cause of it. The effect was the belief that I was a mistake, the belief of I'm not good enough, that I don't belong. The effect of it caused all the problems, not really the cause. Because if someone can deal with the cause, you know, they can, it can be easier, or it can help get better. So the feelings of rejection built in every area of my life, you know, towards myself, feeling unwanted, and not understanding, you know, the parents that you had. Okay, when I got older, I understood where my mother was, but still, her not being there, you feel like maybe she didn't want you. And same with your biological father. And then you going to friends, always being treated maybe differently when you go to a new school, when they ask you about your private life, you know, having to lie, you know, the social worker always coming to visit, me going to Thailand and then having to leave. So it was a lot, and I struggled with relationships, you know, I struggled with connecting to people, but mostly I struggled with myself, because I didn't want to let people know that's how I was feeling and thinking, because it's such a big shame to feel like you a mistake, you know, and I think that belief, that's the biggest rejection, I would say. You rejecting yourself. You know, how do you navigate through that? Do you think that you're unworthy of almost everything and anything? You know, you feel like you don't deserve love, kindness, a future, even happiness. I mean, something as simple as happiness that I felt undeserving
Not
of.
worthy.
Yes. And that being your foundation is not a good one.
Yeah. The effects of trauma are described at length in your book. Sometimes I wondered how did this child cope with the most basic actions of living afterwards? Especially interesting are the psychosomatic symptoms you described to me: pain in the legs, stuttering, tiredness, being sick a lot of the time. Do you think, for a start, it is important to listen to your body's warning, or is it then too late?
I believe it's never too late. So it's to really listen to your body, because we live in a society where we just keep on going. We just go and we just go, and it's like, oh no, I'm sick again, or I have this headache. Let me take Panado or Grandpa, or I have pain in my lower back or my shoulders all the time. Our bodies are telling us things, but we're not quiet enough to listen. We just always trying to recover quickly. That's why, because sometimes we don't have the luxury of recovering naturally, right? Because you have to get back to work, you need to get back to things. Then you just pop all the medication. But the body is tired, not only of that. And if you have a stressful life, and remember that it's not spoken about a lot, but the things that we sweep under the carpet in our brain that we try to avoid to deal with has to go somewhere. It causes, stress in itself causes cardiovascular disease, it causes asthma, it causes strokes, it causes diabetes. Imagine anger and everything else, prolonged stress. It affects our body, and our body is trying to tell us, wait, stop, listen. But there's not a lot of awareness to say that, okay, we go to the doctor for the headache. It's not to say, okay, I'm having constant headaches when I feel overwhelmed or overstressed, or I have this abnormal pain when I am overwhelmed, or what am I running from? Have I been running my whole life? We don't take that time because we neglect our emotions and feelings. It's much harder to think that our emotions and feelings is linked to our body responding this way.
Yes. The complexity of mental illness is another important aspect in this story. Despite being in counseling from a young age, you still struggled with depression and anxiety. Is this something you believe a person must be aware of and handle for the rest of your life, like addiction?
What I can say, there's a difference between mental health and mental illness. You can take care of your mental health with the existence of a mental illness. It's the same like health. You can be healthy with a present illness, for example, right? So I didn't go for continuous counseling or therapy. I adapted, but the older you get, and this is what I've realized practicing, the older you get, the more your brain develops, the more something impacts you. When it really, really impacted me when I hit my teens, right? That's where things just went haywire. And that's because in the process of a teenager, the things you go through and everything resurfacing, and same like you'll see with a lot of kids that are adopted, or things that kids were maybe fostered at a very young age. When it comes to their teens, things just happen, and the parents are not like, what's just happened? Because the things that were suppressed, the brain protects us. So it suppresses things. And when we get older, the brain releases some experiences, some information that then you have to deal with, and maybe you cannot. So what I would say is ongoing counseling, at various ages in your life, especially when you come from a traumatic situation, and then also the right person. So when I got older, I didn't know that you can choose somebody else that maybe doesn't work for you. I just thought this is it. Same with what I thought about your antidepressants. I thought this is what you take, this is what is, but it's the lack of information to say you actually have a choice, because I realize the success of my clients is based on the rapport you have with them. If they can connect with you, if they can trust you, their process is much easier. But with someone that is uncomfortable in your presence, and also the other part is that you need to want to heal. You need to, you choose it. Like I always explain to my clients, it's just me jumping in your car in the passenger seat and helping you along the way. I cannot drive your car for you, and that's what I would say. It's number one, choosing the right counselor, psychologist. It's having ongoing. So if a child has gone through trauma at a young age, at every milestone age, going for counseling, because the younger you are, like when you're young, you go for different type of therapy, play therapy, because children can't like really articulate what they're feeling, and then you go until they can verbalize it, and so on and so forth. Because sometimes we only catch it when we see a drop in marks. We see a child rebelling, retaliating, self-harming, and all of those things. So that's what I would say, is finding the right person, first of all. And the sad part is sometimes people struggle, they can't find the right person. But what I would say, if you can't find the right person, stick with the one you have and learn coping mechanisms, learn tools. Don't wait until you find the right person to help yourself. You can shop around while still getting the help that you might need. That's what I would say. And do research, educate yourself on whatever you're diagnosed with. And that's why I'm advocating for prevention, because when we can take care of our mental health before it gets to mental illness, right? But also mental illness you can get it in different aspects. I'm speaking about trauma situations that you're in.
Yes. I need to address this one aspect that struck me as extremely valid, and I would like to combine it with a follow-up question. The one aspect that was extremely necessary to address was the coping mechanisms that people choose, especially young people, and you work with young people now. Alcohol, drugs, self-harm, suicide thoughts, bullying, violence. That when you experience trauma, you have to have a coping mechanism. That is the one thing I want to ask you about. Is we see it in the systems around us and in broken families. How do you break this vicious cycle? And I want to ask you, what was your turning point to break the cycle of coping mechanisms that's not really working?
So the coping mechanisms, so at a young age, till today, and I think that is when I ask a young person, especially at 9 years old, wanting to stab herself and kill herself, And when I was speaking to this young girl and I asked her, like, where did you hear about suicide? Where did someone in your family, did you see it on TV? No. And the same thing happened with me. It was just like a voice telling you, this is what you should do. This is how you should do it. And that young girl said the exact same thing. And when I also asked a few, like, where did you hear about self-harm? Like, I mean, I did not read, I did not see anyone self-harm. All I knew is this is what you should do. And I did it, and it made me feel better. And same with a lot of young people, because obviously now it's becoming more open. Young people are even self-harming together, which is very disturbing. And now I'm seeing how it's the lack of information on how to cope. If you look at our adults, right, they also do not know how to cope. Some overwork, constantly working, some maybe have outbursts. So it's a lack of information on how do you cope. And what I've really, my turnaround was receiving Jesus in my life. But on the journey there, because Christian people, like for me, I was just like, these people, so judgmental, because of my experience and the Christian people I encountered. You know, they would say something and then do another thing and then judge me when I'm on medication, or judge me because I'm doing A, B, and C. But I didn't encounter love, just unconditional love from any person that I met that said they're Christian. And that's unfortunately a bad representation. And so many people are experiencing that, right? So when I went to varsity and I was in a classroom and I met this girl, which is now my best friend, I cannot explain to you when you can feel that there's something different about this person. Whenever I was around her, because I had so much torment in my brain, like in my mind, it was constant turmoil. I can't even explain it. And just around her, I just felt like it just went peaceful, and she never judged me once. She just loved me. And I was so curious. And when I asked her, there's something that you have that I want. And she said it was Jesus. I was like, really? I was so shocked. And then I met another girl, and she was so graceful and she was so kind. And then I asked her the same thing. I was like, there's something about you. And then she says, no, I have God in my life, and I'm peaceful, and I know that He loves me. And then came to a point where I was really hit rock bottom, where my mother came to my apartment and she's like, Felicia's either you sit here feeling sorry for yourself, or you get up and you make a difference with your life. And then in my brain, I'm still thinking like, this woman, because she would take me to church, and I'm just like, oh, what's going on here? Not for me. And then I realized, when I said to her, you know what, let me try. Because at that point, I didn't have anything else. And I was like, well, and at that point, I was really planning my big exit out of the world, like doing it properly. Even if my parents find a leg there, a head there, I need to just do it properly. And then I was like, okay, then let me put it on hold. If Jesus doesn't work out, then I'll go ahead with it. And come to find, he did. He worked out. And then my inspiration was like, I'm going to be a Christian like those two girls that I met. I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm going to represent who God really is. And I'm going to love people. But first, I had to really understand that I was actually angry at God. So angry at Him. Because where was He? Where was He through all of this? Where was He when I was suffering? So constant questions, and then I had to go through forgiveness. I had to forgive God, myself, and other people. And when I realized how hard it was to forgive myself, because when I understood of who God created me to be and what He thought of me, I couldn't forgive myself for wanting to kill myself. Because I understood how He saw me and how He created me. And when I asked Him, like, where were you? He said I was there. I turned things out for the good. I was there. And that just, it shattered me, and it just broke me. And just that understanding about being unworthy or being a mistake. Where you said, like, I formed in your mother's womb. I know the hairs in your head. You're not a mistake. I know the beginning and the end of your life. I have a plan and a purpose for your life. And that's definitely, I'm worthy. And His Son, Jesus, sacrificed Himself for me. How can I be unworthy? And whatever is God is mine. And that makes me worthy. The life that He has given me. So that was, what I then understood, and reading the Word, there's reasons why God speaks about certain things that we need to do. Those are the coping mechanisms. Those are the tools that we need to live a whole life. So it was going from using coping mechanisms that was whispered in my ear and coping mechanisms that I thought I knew best. And I just tried my best with what I knew, to turning it and getting information, from my counselors, from the Bible, from getting to know myself and how I operate. There's a lot of acceptance that I needed to do. I couldn't continuously compare myself to other people because they didn't go through what I went through, or things that's normal to them. It's not normal for me. So changing that, instead of like coping through a place of unworthiness and not belonging, from not just coping is actually living. Like, how do you live life that you can live that's healthy, and that you can live your purpose and still take care of yourself and still represents who Jesus is and still loving people. Yeah, so it's healthy mechanisms that can help you with what you're currently going through, instead of trying to be like somebody else that has not gone through what you have. Yes,
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, yes, completely. That was, to me, it was a very valuable confession in the book, although it might have been a fleeting observation, is that nobody is perfect. Even Christians are not perfect. Even after you gave your life to the Lord, you still struggled with going to parties, using alcohol, struggled to forgive and forget. It does not vanish at once. And I find it very honest and relatable. So thank you for being honest about that. You went back to Thailand, to the prison, with an outreach program. I would ask you, how do you believe in full closure and forgiveness, or is this, like so many other things in life, an ongoing process? Did going back give you full closure, or are you still working on that?
Okay, no, that's a good question. So just going back to the comment about forgive and forget, I think that pressure of forgetting, we can never forget, but what we can do is let go, right? So what I've learned in my journey is that healing is like an onion. It has layers. So I went on my healing journey since 2014. And then just before like the book process. So going back to Thailand provoked a lot of memories that I was hoping it does. But I don't think I was mentally prepared for that. But I knew that there's something missing, and living and knowing that a part of your life is gone, that you don't have access to. It gives a gap. So with the trip to Thailand, with when I came back, it was very hard to comprehend. The only time I spoke about it when it was in the book. So Deonette was the first person I actually spoke about what really happened. I had to really let it sink in and process it, because it was so hard. I had no idea that my visits to Thailand had such a great impact on me, or even the realization that the fact that that feels like home is not normal. The fact that I had to speak through a thick glass and not be able to touch, flying all the way, going through processes, being searched, going there every single day, speaking about through bars, the guards being something that's so familiar. That's so abnormal. So just all that realization about, how I felt so pulled away, going there, having to come back, reliving that trauma as that 3-year-old every time I went there, was mind-blowing to me. And having to process that was very hard, because on the one side, you look at it as, I was really blessed to be able to go and visit there. And then the one side is, the reality is, I was young. And the older I got, the less I knew who Vanessa really was. And yet she needed me too. So it's this whole complex situation that happened that maybe no one ever thought it would be harmful at all, right? And having to, so after the book process, really speaking to someone about it, really processing it, and that brought complete closure in terms of everything that had happened now with leaving Thailand, the whole Thailand, everything, right? Maybe other aspects of maybe rejection when I maybe have kids or something might just pop up, because there might always be that thorn in your flesh. And then you have to learn a new thing about yourself and handle it differently. But what I would say, forgiveness for those that was involved, forgiving myself. I would say I completely do, because I would not have been able to speak from a place of victory and speak of a place with, you know what, you need to forgive right here. It's keeping you back. And we are the ones that are in control of how much we forgive. Sometimes we still want to hold on, but it is a control thing. And I think what I've learned with God is that God doesn't do things halfway. And why should I? If he loves me unconditionally with everything I've done, why should I not trust him without any conditions? And yes, it leaves you vulnerable, 100%, a lot. But yes, I would say I've completely forgiven, because what I've learned and the valuable thing I've learned is how precious peace is, and what I am willing to do to keep it is to get rid of anything that's going to hinder me. Because I feel like I've suffered too much. That inner turmoil, that hole that you're in, that you think that you might never, ever, that will be the rest of your life. Experiencing peace and freedom, it's so much more than gold and money and wealth, and that's where God wants us to be, and he instructs us to do all of these things to keep that. So I forgive unapologetically and I let go. I have boundaries. I found the value of life. I've been given a second chance. My life could have been gone. The fact that I'm sitting here, coming from all that turmoil and having a clear mind, that in itself is a gift, that I am not going to allow anyone to take from me or me to give it to anyone. Yes.
Yeah. Towards the end of the book, there's a chapter of lessons learned. Ek wil egter vir die leser verbied om na die einde van die boek te blaai sonder om eers die boek deur te lees. No peeking. These lessons acquire new depth if you consider it in context with Felicia's whole story. To me, I'm not even going in this talk, I'm not going into the relationship between you and your mother. It's completely a whole book, I feel. But it is lessons not bought cheaply, considering your young age. I want to ask you something that maybe I hope you don't find offensive, especially after stating in your book that you often resented having to be the responsible one for your mother's feelings or your sister, or more that you can handle at your age. I want to know, are you an old soul by nature, or was it purely the situation you were put in that you had to cope with?
I do think so. As you can see also at the back of the book, before lessons learned, there is, can I say, an overview, a comment by a clinical psychologist, that does speak about what happens in the womb. right? So my
Mhm.
mother, Vanessa, would always say, you know, since I was born, I was always right up. Like my neck wasn't like, you know, apparently babies have like that. She says I was always, I done everything quickly. I was, you know, independent. As a young age, I wanted to make my own tea or, you know, so all of these things. And there's a part where Lisa also shares, you know, her experience with me. And you see that I've always been that independent child, you know, up until, and I don't know, maybe it's how God created me, knowing maybe what
What you
I
had
might
to go
need.
through.
Yes.
Mm.
And I've met a lot of young people that I always ask them, and they always get me. And they feel so relieved when I ask them, like, how old are you? They tell me the age. And I'm like, how old do you feel? And
Oh,
that
no.
always opens such a big opening up that you see me, you hear me. And on my side, I always felt like so old. And when people's like, oh, you're so young, you have life. I'm like, I'm already tired of life. You know, still thinking about all of these other things is exhausting. So with the whole now I would say I've come to terms with it. Before I would fight against it, and wanting just to be that carefree person, you know, that doesn't know all of the things, you know, just being like not knowing stress
Mm.
or not knowing. I would love that. And maybe I would want a childhood that maybe doesn't consist of everything else that I explained in the book. But then what is that going to do for me? So now we're
Yeah.
at the place with having to accept my life, my story, the things I've gone through, is finding the appreciation in it now.
Mm.
And the fact that I know that I can still be a child now. So I always,
So young.
yes, I'm still young, right? And I feel so feel so old uh, internally, but then
Oh,
I
you're
live
a
life
child.
like a child. When I when I flew to Cape Town, the Uber driver is like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I'm like, "No, I'm coming for my book launch." She's like, "You have a book? How old are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm 28." He's like, "You're so young. What do you have to say?" And I'm like, "I get that a lot." Yeah.
Yeah. To close this interview, I have one question for Vanessa left, for Felicia left, and then one question for Deonette. Felicia, two questions actually. The value of Vanessa being a Christian as well, I think after all that's happened must be like a gift. And the one thing in the book that I pick up is that, and you especially talk about it, is that peace. In Afrikaans, the text about vrede wat alle verstand te bowe gaan in die Bible, that special peace you get from God. And I want to know, as a closing, you and Vanessa are Christians. Is that a special gift from God for healing? And what is your hope for the future, for yourself and your relationships? And then to Deonette, hoe is jy persoonlik uit hierdie boek verryk? Ek dink as julle elkeen vir my dit kan antwoord, dan sluit ons hierdie onderhoud op hierdie positiewe noot af.
Okay. So what I would say is that my mother Vanessa got through 6.5 years in prison, and she gives God the glory for pulling her through. And yes, it's peace that surpasses all understanding, because she could have been angry. You know, she could have chose a different life, but she chose God because there's peace in him. That surpasses all understanding. He gives a greater purpose, you know, for it. And with me as well, yes. Peace that surpasses all understanding. And it makes a huge difference to know that there's someone out there looking out for you. And knowing that, you know, that it's written down, like, he trusts me enough to do this. Like, I am so blessed that God chose me to be able to tell my story, you know, for reasons to liberate people, to, you know, not let people feel isolated and alone, because that's a silent killer. That with God, you are not alone at all. And his peace is definitely a peace that nobody can ever give you. Not your parents, not the world, not your husband, not your wife, not your kids, nobody but God. And that's what I would say is, yes, his peace surpasses all understanding if we're willing to accept it and receive it and do the work to maintain it. I mean, and it's free. That's the most beautiful thing. All he wants is for us to live in that peace and know that we are loved, with wanting nothing back but loving him. That's what I would say.
Jy het gevra, hoe is my lewe verryk? Soos ek gaan dit nou gou vir jou antwoord, om Felicia se storie te kon skryf, kan 'n mens nie onaangeraak bly nie. Haar storie het vir my lewe op 'n manier eintlik baie verander, maar baie beslis verryk. Eerstens haar manier hoe sy haar probleme en haar geweldige pyn en seerkry hanteer het, is nie net vir my vir my veral wat as toe die eerste moes aanhoor, het dit vir my gewys hoe dat 'n mens die krag van die Here kry, en dat hy om jou probleme reg te hanteer, wil ek amper sê. Felicia se storie maak dat 'n mens net weer onthou, as jy dink jy kry swaar, moet jy maar net altyd onthou, ander mense daar buite kry nog swaarder. En die feit hoe sy vertel het hoe sy die Here ontmoet het, het vir my ook weer eens laat besef hoe belangrik dit is om in alle tye vas te hou in die Here. Haar geloof wat so versterk het, en vandag is sy, soos ek sê, 'n uitgesproke Christen, en sy leef dit uit. Felicia leef haar lewe uit, haar Christendom. En dit het vir my net geïnspireer om te besef, eerstens jou probleme, gee dit oor in die Here, volkome, vergewe mekaar, soos dit sy nou vir jou vertel het. En moenie weer daaraan dink nie. En dan, soos ek sê, laastens is, hou vas in die Here met alles in jou lewe wat met jou ook al gebeur. Dat so 'n jong meisie vir my dit moes leer. Dit is net 'n waarheid wat 'n mens kan uitleef, is die kwessie dat die Here is altyd met jou, in jou seerste seer, in jou pyn, en alles wat jy deurgaan. Soos ek dink Felicia se Christendom en hoe sy uit hierdie vreeslike seerkry lewe van haar die Here ontmoet het vir my geïnspireer om te sê, weet jy, as Felicia as 'n jong meisie dit kon doen, enige een is dan in staat om dit te doen. En op my ouderdom, as 'n baie ouer persoon as Felicia, kon ek dit nog van haar leer. Soos ja, haar storie het my lewe onherroepelik verander.
Dankie. Ek wil aan Deonette en aan Felicia baie dankie sê vir die geleentheid. Die boek Prison Child was ook vir my 'n besondere openbaring. En ek dink ons lesers sal dit baie geniet. Dit is wel 'n Engelse boek, maar dit is die moeite werd om te lees. En dit is ook 'n boek wat vir my so 'n volledige kringloop van baie rou ervaring, verskriklike dinge wat kan gebeur en wat gebeur het. na 'n absolute boodskap van hoop en vergewing wat besonder is vir so 'n jong vrou. En dan die genade, dit wat sy ook genoem het, die genade, die grace of God, dit wat ons mee kan saamleef. So, Felicia, I would close down and say thank you very much. It's been a privilege. And I almost want to say you must change the name of your book from Prison Child to Free Child of God. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having us. Yeah, I'm really passionate about mental health, you know, especially for those who love the Lord, because we tend to want to pray everything away and not deal with things. So I would like to encourage everyone, you know, if there's a place that's still hurting within yourself, choose to heal. You know, there's so many other things that God wants to show you in your life, and just the level of peace and joy that you need to live, and that you are worthy of living. You know, so give it to God, you know, go to therapy if you need to, speak to someone if you need to, but don't suffer in silence. The enemy is there to take away your purpose, your joy, and everything, and don't allow him to do that. God gave us the power within ourselves, you know, to take control of our life and towards him. So yes, that's what I want to say. You know, don't undermine your mental health, because at the end of the day, everything happens in the mind. Our heart is in the mind. And he says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Your mind renews by unlearning the things that, you know, brings harm and unhealthy coping mechanisms and all of those things. So renew your mind.
Thank you. Thank you very much.